Hey everybody, welcome back to the Overwatch Project. It's June 29th, 5:28 p.m. where I am in the US today. My website is overwatchproject.com. I wanted to talk to you about cognitive biases. They run in the background kind of like a computer virus. They are a lot of them, and there are a lot of them. And there's a website that I found recently called Decision Lab. I want to talk to you about it. It's thedecisionlab.com, and there's a section where they actually catalog most of these cognitive programs that we have. I would put it this way: there's a model of reality that you as an individual, I as an individual have. And there's a true, absolute reality out there. But when you perceive reality, portions of it are being filtered through these mind viruses that are called biases or cognitive filters. And so you never actually, unless you're aware of this running in the subconscious affecting you, unless you bring it out to your conscious mind and then deal with it properly, not deal with it and you think you've dealt with it, but you haven't really dealt with it. Like, for example, the makers of this website, it seems to me like they are fully aware of these biases, and yet they also are affected by them. And I'll get to that in a minute. But so, like, cosmology is like your model of reality, and when you incarnate here as a human being from the spirit planes, and you're born here, the first thing that happens is you're imprinted with certain traits. They come from your astrology, and which is mentioned in this website in a Barnum statement. I'll get to that in a minute. And that already begins to sabotage or affect your incarnation here. If you're new to my channel, I talk about the afterlife and I investigate reality, and come a long way since I started. I started being affected by religious programming, and it took me many years to unprogram myself, to deprogram myself, and realize that a lot of my information was being filtered through cognitive dissonance, which I'll show you on this website also in a minute. The reality I was perceiving was being sabotaged by basically subconscious programming, which was fear programming from religitardism. And so if you want to know more about something like the reincarnation soul trap, or the real reason we reincarnate here, and the fact that this world really, if you look at the totality of the information, it is a reincarnation soul trap in a very parasitic environment. It really, although you could say it's a learning experience, much like prison would be a learning experience, but it's not really beneficial to anyone to incarnate here. But there's no shortage of spirits that would like to do it, and they do all the time, and there's a whole bunch waiting out there. And if you study this long enough, you'll understand what I'm talking about. My website is overwatchproject.com, and I have cataloged there a tremendous amount of resources if you want to do this research for yourself and figure it out for yourself. But in the meantime, somebody brought this website to my attention because I talk about cognitive dissonance a lot. For example, cognitive dissonance, in case you didn't know, is basically why it's hard to change beliefs or what you think is true. Cognitive dissonance allows a person to essentially have opposing information and process it in a way that they can delude themselves into thinking it makes sense. So So this is a perfect example here in this diagram. So your perception, the internal conflict, and the actual reality. I'm sure there's an example here. Let's see. They use the example of smoking, and smokers often rationalize their detrimental decision to continue smoking by either denying evidence that supports the health risks, and you can go on. You can discuss this in any kind of ways, but they use smoking. Now, smoking is different than nicotine, which is something entirely different. So interesting that once people innovated ways to get nicotine without smoking, that the government tards now are all interested in regulating that for some reason. Anyway, the thing is that, if I had a genie grant me a wish, probably I would run an experiment where humans would be removed of cognitive dissonance just to see what happens. Because if you couldn't keep information out that contradicted a belief and you had to actually deal with opposing information, perhaps people would critical think more, perhaps they would investigate things more, perhaps they would be able to change their minds when they're believing bullshit. So it's very interesting. It's probably one of the worst cognitive mind viruses. I'm just going to call them mind viruses because I think they behave more like a computer daemon or something that runs in the background that and once I, real quick recount of my past, once I became aware I was using cognitive dissonance and some of these other mind viruses. When I started my research, I was originally out to figure out authentic Christianity, and I decided to start by reading the entire Bible, then rereading it 3 more times because there were things that just couldn't make sense of, and I began realizing that I was actually mentally editing what I was reading because it was going counter to what I was told about my religion. And eventually, after reading the footnotes, after reading the historicity of the Bible itself and its different books, and reading other things like the Septuagint, going into really great depth, I realized that I had been brainwashed. And the entire thing is nothing but a mind control thing. And once I got rid of that, I was able to start investigating reality without, cognitive dissonance. And I'm able to I'm able to become aware when I'm using cognitive dissonance. It's not like I don't use it or it doesn't happen, but I choose to allow it to happen. For example, if you want to eat something that isn't really healthy for you, but you're eating fried chicken, but then you have club soda or something that doesn't have any calories as a drink, and you're kind of justifying it that way. That's harmless cognitive dissonance. But a lot of people use it and they're stuck in it. If you're aware of that show that's been getting trashed all over YouTube because it's horrible, The Acolyte, I have actually been watching the show just to make sure that the reviews are accurate, and they are. And I'm not going to get into a review of the show, but what the show also shows that a lot of people don't talk about is that it's built on, this is a division in reality based on cognitive dissonance. The people who made this show thought they were making something really wonderful. Of course, there's so many problems with it that has nothing to even do with their motivations for making the show, with the fact that there's so many problems with this show. Including the fact that the script on the very same episode, the dialogue will contradict itself, within the same episode, is just astonishing to me. Some of the stuff that's in the show is absolutely amazing, canon breaking, lore breaking. If you're a Star Wars fan, you know what I'm talking about. I actually put together this giant playlist. I'll link to it below. It keeps growing, but I'm just adding like all the best of videos. The actual reviews of it are more entertaining than the show itself, but because of these biases, and it's like when somebody's listening to me, or these people that are being bombarded by the critics in this show, or people that say maybe are stuck as a fundamentalist religious person and are listening to my channel, they are affected by all these biases. See, they can never actually hear the criticism. A lot of it gets processed through cognitive dissonance. Actually, it's amazing that human beings can decide whether or not to safely cross the street when you look at all this crap that goes on in our heads. In my opinion, humans are intentionally designed this way. You don't see this type of mental viruses in any life forms on Earth that we have. There are life forms that we have affected, we have domesticated or whatever. But if you look at just like life that is like inherently separate on its own, it just with nature, you don't see any of these mental viruses running in, like say when you're watching a bird, or if you're watching some wild animal, or even a raccoon or coyote. Where I live in Florida here, there are coyotes. These beings are not affected by these things. They are just completely in tune with nature, and they don't. But look at all this crap. So cognitive dissonance is one I've mentioned lots of times. It is a big problem in human thinking. It keeps you from processing information. So everybody's got a cosmology. That's your model of reality that has been created through what you've been indoctrinated into, aka educated, of what you were born as, your imprinted avatars programming from astrology, and your environment, and your interactions with other people, other beliefs you picked up along the way. And when somebody offers you facts, this is why facts, figures, logic doesn't change anybody's minds. Matter of fact, the next biggest one is called the backfire effect. It's also known as belief perseverance. This follows cognitive dissonance in people once they get information that counters their current understanding of something. The backfire effect makes it possible for them to double down on the bad information that they believe in. So not only do they maintain the belief, but now they become more entrenched in the belief. So this is another big one. Can you believe that all this is running in people's the brain is essentially a processor for consciousness. As Rupert Sheldrake once said, that it's like a reducing valve. Of course, he never addresses why that would be beneficial to have your consciousness reduced. But it's not just a reducing valve. It is like a processor, and it's got firmware. And this crap that you're looking at on the screen here is firmware running in people. So you have to be very kind of diplomatic when you're talking to people. I don't get into like this debate with people because I know it's going to spark off a lot of disruption, and it's not beneficial to what I'm trying to put out there. But my message is very simple. You live here, you're going to eventually pass on. When you pass on into the astral plane in the afterlife, and yes, for you atheists out there, I'm not going to get into it, but if you're a materialist atheist, there is an afterlife, and only because of these biases can you not process all the totality, massive amount of information that's out there about that particular thing, that there is an afterlife. But when you enter the afterlife, if you're stuck into one of these religions or New Age crap or some of these Eastern philosophies or whatever thing, because at the core elements are always the removal of individuality and the ability to get you stuck into the reincarnation system so that you hang out in the earth astral and eventually you might come back, or who knows, the earth astral could be part of the parasitic environment and you live in one of these astral planes for even eternity, but you are never going to be completely free because you're part of this parasitic system here, like a loosh farm. So, but if you're trying to understand what I'm talking about on my channel, if you're trying to process all the massive amount of information, all of these links I provide, if you bother to start reading a lot of the books that can piece all this together with you, you're not going to get very far if you're being affected by one of these biases, especially the big ones. Now, there is a great term I actually learned before I knew it was one of these biases. I actually learned it from Legal Man. He has the Quash podcast, and I recommend that you listen to it because you may be shocked at how much crap that you believe in just about our own free, quote unquote, we live in a free country thing that you might believe in, or if you're stuck in government-tardism, you might want to pay attention to some of his podcasts, as you could potentially have some of your beliefs shaken, as long as you're not triggered by the backfire effect or cognitive dissonance. For example, a lot of people, including myself, had certain views about some of our past presidents, including Lincoln. It wasn't until I heard about Lysander Spooner and read some of his books or essays, and then I heard some more of them on the Quash's podcast that a whole different picture was opened up to me about the 1860s and what was really going on back then. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting stuff that could help you become aware of how affected you are by certain things. Now, let me just point out that this website, in my opinion, and what it seems to me is not really made by benevolent. It's not really made for benevolent purposes. And also, a lot of these sites, and I have linked to other ones that list cognitive dissonance, seem to be affected by the very things that they understand or think they understand. For example, this Decision Lab thing works with companies and organizations and basically uses this information to help control people's minds. That's what it seems like to me. In my opinion, that's what part of their function is. And they use this information as a psychological tool to do things. Oops, clicked on the wrong part there. Let me see if I can bring that back up. As you could probably tell, that they are either victims themselves. There's a how do I explain this? Becoming aware of all these cognitive biases and filters and mind viruses, and it seems to me like the people that actually study them and write articles about them, publish all kinds of websites about them, are actually in another layer of the mind control system. There's like the people that are completely unaware of these things, and then there's people that are completely aware of them and are still in another layer, still regulated by them. For example, I'm not going to discuss what you just looked at on the screen, but you get the idea. But even beyond that, in the biases list section on this website, it starts off here, biases, the science is clear, humans take mental shortcuts. Here you can read about why we do this and how you can avoid it. Well, they didn't avoid it right here in the very beginning, because there's an authority bias and they use it right here. It's an appeal to authority. In the Barnum effect, they actually use a Barnum statement. A Barnum statement is attributed to P.T. Barnum, the circus guy, because, and actually the most places you'll hear Barnum statements is from governmentards. This is when you get told something, it's kind of an open-ended thing. They use it a lot when they're talking about laws or enacting new laws or some political bullshit, whatever they're talking about. It's open to your personal interpretation, but it may not be what they actually mean. If you get my drift. So, for example, in this website they have the Barnum effect, which is, the name for this, and it says here, why do we believe our horoscopes? Now, I'm sure what they mean here is the horoscope that you read in the paper, or if anybody's still out there actually getting a newspaper, or one of those, something you get in a fortune cookie or something. But that's the Barnum statement. The Barnum statement here is, why do we believe our horoscopes? Now, it's a Barnum statement because it never defines what horoscope. See? So if I say, do you believe in horoscope, in your horoscope, am I talking about Western astrology? Am I talking about Vedic astrology based on the Eastern Hindu astrology? Am I talking about the astrology that you'd find from your local news or newspaper, if that still exists for you, wherever you are? What astrology am I talking about? See, I never defined it. It doesn't define it here. So the website itself is using a Barnum statement to make a point about a Barnum effect. It's actually a victim of its own garbage. And so, if somebody were to ask me, why do we believe in horoscopes? I would say, well, if you're dealing with a really good Vedic astrologer, you're going to get highly detailed information. See, the Barnum effect, also commonly referred to as the Forer effect, describes when individuals believe that generic information, which could apply to anyone, applies specifically to themselves. So it's talking about like the horoscopes that you read in the back of a newspaper. And that is not the only kind of horoscope. So I would say that is a Barnum statement in and of itself. If you're dealing with a Vedic astrologer that knows what they're doing, you're going to get highly detailed, accurate information about yourself, as long as you give them your correct date of birth, your correct place of birth, and the correct time of birth. A Vedic astrologer can shock you as to what they can tell you about all the traits that you're programmed with. And so like, I hope this helps people understand, because when you're trying to figure out the truth of the matter, and you can see, like, a lot of things, like, you can watch, and this is why it's kind of hopeless to argue with people if they don't if you start talking to somebody and you bring up the topic of, say, the reincarnation soul trap, which a lot of you that have viewed my channel in the past, probably have done. There's for me, a very simple. As soon as you get enough pushback from somebody, they're not interested. You can't provide them with the information that will change their minds, because they're going to firewall that information. In a weird way, people behave like computers. There's a lot of functions to our thinking that is very similar to, like, a computer. And once you hit that firewall, you're not going to get in. There are psychological techniques you can use to get around somebody's firewall and get them to start thinking for themselves. But it all depends on how far gone they are. And as you've seen, I'm sure, if you watch some social media and you watch some of these really, videos from people, there are people that are too far gone. Like, I don't know what kind of psychological manipulative genius you'd have to be able to penetrate their firewall. Especially people that are over or highly emotional thinkers. Because once their emotions run out of control, there's, really, how are you going to get in there to do anything? But I'll link to the decisionlab.com, the biases section, so you can read this for yourself. And I'm going to put a link to the Quash's podcast here, in case you haven't heard of him. Legal Man. Hopefully YouTube doesn't, care about the link. And I'll link to my playlist on the Acolyte. You see, the showrunner and the people involved in this show, it seems to me like they are probably completely ruled by all these cognitive filters, their programming that they have absorbed throughout their life. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance I see here, probably a lot of narcissism as well. And in some ways it's sad, because it didn't have to be that way. It didn't. So, but these are very entertaining. And if you did watch the show, you would see that it's accurate. These are accurate, objective reviews with a lot of humor in them. And the playlist just keeps growing, because every day there's the ink. And what's weird is I've heard, I'm not sure how accurate it is, but I heard somebody did a calculation and found out that there's 3 times more reviews of the Acolyte. This is like YouTube gold for the reviewers. So much so that I'm not even going to bother commentating on all the problems with this show, because there's so many people that covered everything, and even things I didn't think about. So I just decided to make a playlist on it. But there's like 3 times more reviews of the Acolyte than all 3 seasons of The Mandalorian. And this show isn't even done yet. We got 3 more episodes to go as of when I'm making this video right now. It's just unbelievable. It's like a phenomena. Also, there's a lot of other things I can get into here. I probably get into in a different video. But television or videos, fictional stuff. A lot of it is connected to, in a way, has its own magical element to it, because it's like kind of hypnotic. And there's a lot of intention and focus and attention that we pay to these things. And if you're not aware that you're doing that, then it's more likely to control you instead of you being able to analyze it. So you have to watch out for that. But also, the thing is that because there's a lot of these mind viruses running in people's heads, their cosmology is all screwed up. And so when they're trying to inject or when they're trying to affect or manifest what they think is reality, blows up, backfires. A lot of this stuff has to do, I think, with the fact that if you have a skewed or a corrupted view of a cosmology, and it doesn't match close enough to actual reality, and I'm willing to admit, my cosmology, is not going to be right on. I don't know how far off I am from actual understanding the absolute truth of reality, but I think I'm closer today than I was like 10 years ago. But a lot of these people that are, hyperly emotional and have a cosmology that may be really skewed off from the rules of reality. If you think of our reality kind of like a video game with boundaries and rules that you can flex and bend and find glitches in and hack a little bit to manifest what you want in it. I think that the more off course you are when you're trying to manifest something, you're going to manifest something that you're not going to desire. It's going to kind of have a backfire effect on that when you're doing this kind of stuff. So when you're trying to affect people's view of, say, some social construct that you're convinced has to be put in everybody's minds, and some, social agenda that you have, and this social agenda doesn't really jive with the reality, you're going to be confused as to why what you're doing isn't working. And as a matter of fact, it's generating a tremendous amount of pushback, and to me, it's kind of funny to watch. It's kind of hilarious. And even these thumbnails are absolutely hilarious. Well, I hope I articulated myself clear enough. It's very tough when I come on and make videos. I don't always say exactly what I mean. It doesn't really come out, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just I try my best to articulate things, but sometimes my thinking is kind of like scattered, and when I try to put it into words, in my head it's all lined up, but when I try to, our language leaves a lot to be desired. So that's it for today. I hope that you found this useful, and leave your comments below, like and subscribe, and check out my playlist of F Disney Star Wars. And it's more entertaining than the actual show. But hey, if you do have access to be able to watch the actual show, watch it, because then you'll know for sure that the reviews are accurate. I happen to have canceled Disney Plus a long time ago, but they seem to want me to stick around. I think for numbers reasons. They basically sent me an email that they were keeping my account active for like a year, which I thought was crazy. But whatever, it's their company. They can do whatever they want, including running into the ground, apparently. So that's it. Don't forget to check out my website, overwatchproject.com, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.